right.
All
We
righty.
are live. So thank you everybody who is watching this live and also who's watching this on replay. I got with me Connor Martin. He is Loveland Lifestyles. And today, I think one of the things that over the last few weeks, and even today, I was having a conversation with a client about their concern about interest rates, what it has done to their monthly mortgage payment, and this concern about a recession, a housing bubble that's going to pop. And so there was just recently an article out that I felt like is a perfect article to discuss why maybe today and 2022 isn't 2008, and why maybe the real estate market is not going to crash. Now, I say that, but I also preface it with anything can happen. And I am about as vulnerable as anybody, especially on the real estate side of things, as that is how I got my start in real estate, was on the investing side. That is what provides me and my family the majority of our income, is through our rental properties. So I tell this to you guys, yes, with a perspective of, one, I hope it does not happen, but two, it could happen. And until my opinions change on investing, I'm going to keep kind of chatting about what I think as far as a good, safe investment.
Yeah, no, I definitely understand that, especially with everybody I talk to, from brokers who've been in for 50 years to newer guys like me who've only been in for a few years. Everyone's talking about what's going on in the market, especially with those interest rates starting to creep up to that 4% line. And with what we're hearing in March, potentially stuff happening with the federal side of the interest rate starting to creep up. People are starting to wonder what's going to happen here in the next months. People are trying to predict it. And just like you said, people are starting to say this seems like a housing bubble like 2008. So, how can we differentiate those two things and really show, that this is a totally different situation right now than we were back 15 years ago?
Definitely. So there are a few things. I don't know how to exactly go live and show my screen and things of that nature, but we're going to jump into 4 reasons why it's not necessarily the same. So the first one is that housing prices have increased dramatically so over the last 2 years, but so has wages in tandem with those housing prices. Now, not nearly as much, especially over the last few years, but when you look at communities like Phoenix and Atlanta and Las Vegas that got decimated by the 2008 recession, housing prices, when you look at inflation comparatively, are kind of just now getting back to those similar levels where our wages have increased. Now, Fort Collins specifically, not so much. We didn't have that big of a pop in 2008. We went down at, about 2% and 0.5% respectively. But our wages in 2008 were about $65,000 for a median household, whereas today in 2022, around $96,000 for a median household income, which when you look at it in 2008, the median sales price, if you were to put down 20% on a $233,000 house, your monthly mortgage and interest would be about $1,100, $1,120, or about 20% of your median household income.
Yep.
Today, it is a little bit higher in Fort Collins, where your median sales price, if you were to put 20% down, you're looking at closer to about $1,900 a month. And when you're at $96,000 median household income, you're closer to about 25% of your, your principal and interest is 25% of your median household income. So we don't follow the trend as far as the United States goes, but our incomes have increased, but as have our purchase prices of the home. But in 2008, we had an interest rate of about 6%. We are increasing right now from 3% to 4%, and maybe trending higher, but we are double the purchase price, but we do have about a 30% discount off of what the interest rate was back then.
Oh gosh, yeah. No, and one of the big things that I've seen, especially with clients that have come into Colorado, is they are coming with a lot of money, people from the big cities, that's one of the big reasons why I see the increase coming. People are having a lot more cash on hand.
Mm-hmm.
Those are things that I didn't see as much back in the 2008 time or even before that, where people were able to go out and just just more people than I've seen put all cash down for a home. So, to me, that's just a huge difference, being able to have that higher medium income for, the state of Colorado, and being able to use it, and prices tend to always work with each other going up or down.
Yeah. Which kind of leads into the other, a couple other of the areas of why 2022 isn't 2008 as far as a housing bubble goes, which is our inventory levels are about 25% of what they were in 2008. We had about 1,400 homes monthly come onto the market in Fort Collins in 2008. Right now, we're having about 330 homes come onto the market in 2022.
Yep.
And our population went from 140,000 to 175,000 people. So you have an extra 35,000 people competing for 25% of the amount of homes. And, absolutely things can change in a moment's notice. COVID was happening for months before, but we didn't think it was going to come to the United States. And then on a dime, it just changed, and all of a sudden we are on lockdown. So things can happen, and happen very quickly. We saw an interest rate go from 3% to 4% over 4 weeks. And so things can happen very quickly. So everything that we're saying right now could not matter at all if all of a sudden, we go to war and our supply lines completely shut, stop for whatever reason. And we can't build houses, people don't sell, interest rates pop, and the market just goes crumbling down, which it could.
Oh gosh, yeah.
But right now, the reason why, for me, I'm still looking at potentially investing in Fort Collins. Actually, I'm looking at buying a single family house here in the next couple of months, is supply and demand. Basic economics say that, supply is down, demand is up, prices are going to increase. And I'm not seeing that much of a softening of demand, but I am seeing a little bit. Are you seeing anything with your clients on the interest rate side of things that are either conversations that you're having, or that people are pulling out of contracts?
Yeah, so I've had 2 examples that have recently come up. One is a new build out in Windsor. Thank gosh these guys are very secure in their money and their funds they had. But one of the biggest things, it was a project that we started, 13 months ago or 14 months ago with a new build, and you start off at an interest rate that back then was even in 2%, high 2s, and then to the day that they're going to be closing coming up in March, all of a sudden the interest rates are going to be creeping up to that 4% mark. And so when they were able to actually get the interest rate locked in, they got it at around 3.65. And when they were looking at the financings with the HOA fees, with the Metro District fees, it started squeezing that money down pretty tight, to where they were starting to get concerned if it was going to go up any further, that they were going to have a struggle affording that home at that point. Sure. And for sitting there waiting for 13 months for a home, and then to have an interest rate change on you all of a sudden, it's not a fun feeling.
Right.
And even with my I'm working with some buyers from out of state, from New Mexico. They came in with a very healthy budget, but with interest rates, it's dropped them, close to 25 to 50 grand, to where they would feel comfortable moving into a home. So it's just totally changed the perspective on what people can afford. And, it really makes it a big difference where, people are going to end up, are they going to be to the point where they're just, taken out of the market because they can't afford it? Or, what type of house are they going to have to move to? Are they going to be from a $600,000 house down to a $550,000 house? Because that $50,000 difference when you're going in and viewing homes can make a significant difference on the updates in the home.
Yeah. Which, saying that, we are still at these historic low interest rates, and it does make a significant difference. Now, if we continue to increase those interest rates, and when I made a 2022 housing predictions video at the beginning of January, my prediction was that at the end of 2022, we were going to end at 4%. We are there, and we're only in the end of the second month.
Yep.
And I don't think anyone sees interest rates decreasing, but probably increasing still. So
Yep.
it's one of those things where if interest rates where they were at 6% at the current home prices, that principal and interest is going to be pretty dramatic. And if interest rates pop up there, it definitely could cause some ripples. But right now, fortunately, that's not necessarily the case. And those buyers that are buying, one of the other reasons that 2022 is not 2008 is lenders are about as annoying as it gets right now.
Yep.
And I love my lenders. We do the Fort Collins Fellas podcast, but lenders are digging deep into buyers' ability to afford these properties. I mean, I joked about on a reel that I did today that they're looking at that 7th grade payment that you made to your buddy, and they're wanting to know if was it truly a gift, and are you going to sign that letter of explanation telling them that yes, in fact, I'm willing to sign that this was this. Lenders aren't far off from digging and finding all of those things, and your credit scores have to be pretty much 620 and above to even be in considerations. And the difference between buyers in 2008 and 2022 is they called it the subprime mortgage crisis and housing crisis for a reason. There were houses being given out, for stated income. You were getting money at closing with your loans. They weren't verifying anything, and, zero down, negative payments. I mean, it was crazy. They just thought the housing market could never be touched, and clearly it could. And so today's buyer is much, much stronger on average than the buyer was in 2008. And lenders are under a microscope making sure, because they have to ultimately go by Fannie Freddie standards, because they're going to be selling that loan off more than likely. And so whoever they're working with has these specific standards that they're having to abide by. Now, I know they're trying to kind of soften that to allow buyers to afford, because what is one of the most important things to the government as far as people's net worth is home ownership, and they need to allow people to buy homes and the ability to have home ownership. And so that's going to be kind of under the spotlight as well. But the buyers today are much, much stronger and more qualified than the buyers of 2008 on average.
Yep. No, once you're stuck in there, just like 2008, my uncle had to deal with this actually on a house they sold over in Parker, Colorado. They decided to go in and they sold it to an individual that literally had no down payment, nothing, no good credit score. They lived in it for about 2 months, never made a payment. Then it goes into foreclosure. And that was the cycle that was happening. Here, it's not the cycle anymore. At least in Fort Collins, as I know, we're not seeing foreclosures like we used to. Everything
across the United States, really.
Even United States. And so to me, that shows that people are strong financially. People are making their payments, and so it really comes down to the fact that, people are prepared for this. Lenders have kept it safe for everyone. And so it's not going to turn out from my prediction, we're not going to see a bunch of foreclosures all of a sudden just in 2022 because of interest rates changing or anything like that.
Well, yeah. I mean, when I started in real estate, that's how I got started, was buying foreclosures at the trustee's doorstep. Houses coming through. And that was when I bought in 2009 a foreclosure that we did a little fix and flip. $125,000 in Fort Collins is what we bought that thing for. But that's just not happening anymore. But the main reason that's not happening is because of how much equity the average American has in their home. And yes, we did have a foreclosure moratorium for many, many, many months. We had the loan forbearance where there's only about 800,000 people left in that, but there's so much money that people have in their houses as far as equity. They can refinance. They can put the payments at the end. They can bring their loan current. They could sell their house, but there's not going to be this wave of foreclosures, mostly because there's so much equity in these people's homes, where you're not going to have this wave of inventory hit the market, whereas we did in that 2008 period, because people didn't have the equity with the ability of the buyer with, zero down payment, low credit scores, should not have been buying the house, and zero equity in a house, and then just having to throw the keys up and say goodbye, because in Las Vegas and Nevada and Phoenix where houses drop 30 to 50%. Why would you even care about paying back a house that you will never get that equity back?
Yep.
And that's just we're not seeing that right now. And now if houses and the market started to tank and we saw people still buying houses and have negative equity, maybe in a couple of years, sure, we could see that. But right now, I was talking to a client that I told him, I said, even in the last 3 to 4 months at a purchase price of about $500,000, I think they've seen about $20,000 to $30,000 appreciation.
Oh yeah.
And so I told them, I said, it's a consideration to buy this house and potentially sell it when you close, even with interest rates popping, because of the amount of equity you have in this house, which is just nuts to say. The exact model that they're under contract for is now going for $20,000 to $30,000 higher than they were just 4 months ago.
Oh yeah, even on new builds. I mean, new builds are really where I'm seeing the equity really showing.
Right?
I've been living in the house for a year, and you got 80, 90,000 sitting in your equity from your home just right there.
Yeah.
And I don't know from your perspective, and it's something I've been talking to friends about and other realtors about, but when you're looking at homes here and you're with your clients, the one thing I've been noticing that realtors that have sellers, especially in, desirable neighborhoods, one time a house will go on the market for 565, it'll go up an extra 20, 30,000 over asking. And then another house will pop up in that neighborhood that has that $20,000 to $30,000 over asking price for their starting bid. And then it'll go up another 20,000. And that's kind of what I've seen in neighborhoods where that equity is just building so quickly that it's just kind of mind-boggling when you talk about it and you talk to buyers. It's like, well, you're going to have to end up putting XYZ in just to even get close to winning out of 5 contracts because our supply is so low.
Well, and that honestly, like, I don't necessarily see a crash or a bubble popping, but I would love it for it to flatline for like the next 3 to 5 years. And don't get me wrong, I'm sure I've got some buyers that are under contract. I just closed on a deal today with clients, and I think they've done a great job on their house. And so I'm sure they're like, no, we want to see the housing and the equity, continue to go. But for me to think it's a stable, healthy market, I would love to see 2 to 3% appreciation in the next couple of years. We're not going to see that. We're going to see probably closer to 7 and 10 this year, but 2 to 3% flat line, and then average back out around that 5% like we have been historically. 5% to me, that's healthy.
Yep.
I'm good with 5%. That is attainable, not a shock to the system, not developing this urgency of buyers to quickly get in before interest rates pop, before housing prices continue to go up. So I would love for there to be some boredom in the real estate market. But, right now it is wild. And I just don't see it slowing down anytime soon. Interest rates continue to go up, will put some pressure on that.
Yep.
And a conversation that, Business Insider put out is that they feel that possibly interest rates and also people who have bought second homes and investors who own property are considering dumping, especially after all of the appreciation we've seen over the last couple of years, which could put a pretty decent bump on inventory. And I do think that's possible. I do think there's actually a substantial amount of owner-occupied properties that are here in Fort Collins that people have been buying. Maybe in markets like Phoenix or Arizona, where there's a bigger portion of investors, is there bigger risks? But I don't see the large Blackstone groups coming in here to Northern Colorado and buying up 50 homes as rentals. But, I do see individuals interested in investing. I'm being one of them. But probably one of the other things that you had talked about is rental payments. I think there's a potential that the government support of rental payments from tenants will soon run out of money.
Oh, yeah.
And I personally have seen renters get benefit from this, which I think has been great for a lot of individuals. I think some may have maybe taken advantage of it a little bit, but I've seen checks of anywhere between $5,000 to $20,000 to help pay back rent and future rent of these tenants because they didn't have the funds to pay. And eventually that's going to run out. I do feel like there's a substantial amount of jobs out there for people to get. But if renters don't pay their mortgage and the investor can't pay, or renters don't pay their rent and the investor can't pay their mortgage, they might just drop the property or let it go. So there's some pressure there as well.
Oh yeah, no, and I've been working with this individual, Jim. Patrick knows him. He's been around being a broker for 40, 50 years now. And one of the things he's taught me and told me over the time is, when things start changing, we heard things about, the 1031 exchange might be going away potentially, but nothing's been set in stone. Just some of those extra external factors that you wouldn't even think about, capital gains that could be, changing. That's going to change the investors' minds a lot, especially depending on where you're at. Like where you're at, you still got time to make it a long-term investment. And, you can purchase something now where a lot of these guys that are getting into their 60s, 70s that have held on to properties for 20, 30 years, waiting for the time. This is the time for them to do it. And I've seen quite a few of them starting to slowly let go of their leash and let some of their properties go. And so they're just kind of testing the water to see.
Well, yeah. And also even in addition to, if interest rates are increasing, if the Fed funds rate has increased and bond yields are increasing, for the longest time there, the last 4 to 5 years, investors couldn't get a good return really anywhere. They could go and play in the stock market, but if they wanted a safe placement of their capital, there wasn't a bond that was paying them a good enough interest rate for them to park their money for the next 5 to 10 years. So they got involved with real estate.
Oh, God, yeah.
And if all of a sudden you can find a 3 to 5% bond that's about as safe as it gets, that investor is going to take that $1 million and go park it possibly in that bond rather than in a couple investment properties. And so you could potentially see a reduction of investors selling their properties, but also a reduction of investors finding yield in other areas such as bonds and treasuries and safe havens where they can get, a decent return on their money, which they haven't been able to get for the last 4 to 5 years.
Oh yeah. No, there's been a lot of people just holding and waiting for these moments. So
yeah, definitely. I mean, and there's a lot of money on the sidelines right now, a lot of money on the sidelines, hoping for a crash. And I just don't know if that's going to happen. It very well could. I definitely think that you got to make a good decision for you and yours, but hopefully this video has helped you kind of see some different perspectives. And we always recommend do your own research, but feel free to reach out to either myself or Connor about further questions or concerns and things that you want to get more information on.
I got one more question for you because this is something that me and a bunch of buddies are tossing over. So, with the housing market, how it's been and it's been increasing up like it has been, one of the things that I know, or at least from what I feel gut feel wise, is, with COVID and how everybody was able to go to remote. One thing that I've been sitting there thinking of is how big of a pool of people is that are going to be able to go remote because of COVID and move this way. A lot of my clients that I had from last year were all remote. They just randomly became remote from their companies, and they're like, well, I just want to move out to Colorado. And so I know that's another external factor of like, how big is that pool and how long is that also going to last, where people are from out of state are going to be just moving. Like, they always move, but it seems like there's just a lot more influx of where people are moving to different states at this point, especially from some of those really big cities.
Yeah.
And so that's just another one I thought I'd throw out there for you to think about, and if you had any ideas on that.
Yeah, honestly, I feel like a lot of my clients are from out of state. Relocation, they can work remotely indefinitely, and a lot of companies are seeing the productivity of their employees actually increase from working from home. And I don't think that's necessarily going to change, especially with this metaverse that's, coming out, and the technology and internet and allowing people to jump on calls, less in office. They will get to move. And I think actually this has been happening for a lot of years. You see places like Twitter and Google and Apple get location, and Amazon get locations in Colorado where people want to live and maybe are a little bit more affordable than, the East Coast or Silicon Valley. And so I definitely think that it's already been happening, but will continue to happen more and more, especially as old school employers get more and more comfortable with the idea of not necessarily having their butts in seats, but more productivity based.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So, well, I appreciate you guys watching. Again, if you guys have any comments or questions or anything like that, feel free to reach out. Until next time, guys, my name is Patrick Sukup, and this is Connor Martin. We're both with Sukup Real Estate here in Northern Colorado. Take care, and until next time.
All right, see you guys. Perfect.
Sweet.